Welcome to episode 116. And today we got a nice open source project to talk about. Kind of a walkthrough. Today's beer of the day is brought to you by Jack's Abbey. This is Framing Hammer. This is vanilla. I think 8 years old from the archives. And this is not too milky, it's not a Guinness. It's not that heavy, but it's got a lot of malt. It's got a lot of vanilla. It's a porter. And then we've got this open source project to talk about, and it is relating to Xcode, is that there are so many gotchas. There are so many problems. I have one app that I'm trying to get into the App Store. It used to be in the App Store. It got removed from the App Store because I didn't update it in years. And then I redid it from scratch, still can't get it in there. And I have to spend one of my $50 support tickets to even get help. I've been working on this app for like 12 years. I've had it in the App Store for 7 years, and then it's been out for 4 years, and then I want to put it back. Usually what I do, this is the typical strategy for working with Apple. You do something, you follow all the rules, and then it works, and then you're in the App Store. Or it doesn't work, you bang your head against the wall, you give up, you delete it from your computer for a year. Next year, you reinstall it and upgrade it, and then it either doesn't work or it does work, or you just uninstall it and wait another year and then install it again. I mean, you really just cannot put your heart into this. If you were an iOS developer as your full-time job, I mean, that's just self-harm rates are through the roof because you just can't do certain things and they're not documented. There's no help anywhere. It's just Apple is seriously broken. And this goes back to like Steve Jobs days. I mean, this is since the beginning. It is really just that painful. Some of the stuff works great and some of it is just not possible and completely undocumented, undefined behavior. So why are we even doing this stuff? Well, sometimes it's fun to use and the tools are different and interesting. They have a lot of features like the WYSIWYG editor for Swift and a lot of good stuff. But again, if you don't have a little bit of help getting started, you might as well just, punch a brick wall. And that's what we do here, the helping part, not the punching a brick wall part. One of the projects that used to be around for this was CocoaPods. Now, this did have a starting template, which is a lot better than the Apple template. I am a contributor to the CocoaPods project, so you can find my stuff in the GitHub there. Also, I was a contributor to the template for getting started with CocoaPods. If you can see in my career, this is a theme. In blockchain, I'm known for helping people get started with blockchain and helping people get started with NFTs with my tutorials and this phone call going into 116 episodes. But I've also done this working at Google. I've done this for Linux. I've done this for KDE. I've done this for iOS development. Doing this all the time. But typically the way that I do this is that I write guides and then I offer, support or connect into a community. Basically, I don't want you to be alone here. That's the thing. You're going into a jungle, a map and a machete. That's what I'm giving you. Open source, you need a map and a machete. Let's go into this specific project here. So this is called Swift 5 module template. Now, why is that? So Swift is the language of Apple. It's iOS, Apple Watch, Apple TV, Vision Pro. They're all using Swift, and it's a great language. There's a lot of good stuff going on with it. This one goes a little bit further than that. In addition to telling you how to start your project and how to share it, it also tells you how to set up continuous integration, how to set up testing. We're going to start this project from scratch, which is something we do every once in a while. Every time there's a new version of Xcode, we just rebuild this whole project. So I'll do that today. I actually have one of these. It's called FD Waveform View. It looks like this. It's basically just you load an MP3 file and it gives you a waveform for it. And it also supports showing progress as you're playing through it. You can also zoom it, interact with it. So you can zoom into part of a song and it'll render it in more detail as you zoom in. Click on it to pan, like you can scrub the song. And this is also used in a lot of places. This has got 1,000+ stars on it. It's got 100 forks. honestly, this is really just because I came out with this a long time ago, and a lot of people want it, so right place, right time. And this is a nice little module. I use it in one of my own projects. It's speech therapy apps. You always want to show skin in the game before you teach people. I learned this in blockchain and forever ago at Google, but also teaching people is a great way to learn yourself. So here's my skin in the game. I've definitely spent a lot of time sharing these modules for people that do iOS dev. I'm happy to do that. And then today we're going to look at this other project to teach people how to do the same thing. So let's get started. Here's the project. I've cloned it locally, and here is the folder. There's a README. These are all the best practices that I've identified, but basically what we're going to do, we're going to use Xcode. We're going to start from scratch, and we're going to do this thing called the recipe. Now, the recipe is going to give us specific things we're going to type in and do, and it's going to produce a template project. That template project is going to go into this repo for other people to use. Now, anybody should be able to repeat this process. It is a reproducible process. So really the recipe is the instructions for creating this thing, for baking the cake, and the cake itself is the template. So if you want to go make your own module, you can take this template, you can run this configure script to change the name of it or some stuff like that, and then you can go build your stuff and share it with the world. Or you can just read the recipe and follow all the steps yourself, and then you'll get the same exact output. So it's reproducible. That's an important thing here. However, there's also some justification here, because what's the old adage? This is the sexist, I guess. The mom is teaching the daughter how to cook the fish, and she says, put it into the oven, make sure you cut the tail off first, and cook it at 400 degrees. And then the daughter teaches their daughter, and forever and ever and ever. The daughter asks, well, why do we cut off the tail? The mom says, I don't know. That's what my mom taught me. And so she asked grandma. She says, grandma, why do you cut the tail off the fish? And they say, I don't know. So she asks great-great-grandma. And grandma says, oh, it's because it didn't fit in the oven. So we don't want to make recipes that are based on our experiences. We want to explain why we're doing these things, right? And sometimes our recommendations will become outdated, so you can go trace back where these recommendations came from. So let's get started. This recipe cites all the best practices we follow, which is in this repo. So here's the output of this recipe. It's going to be this thing here. Now I hear everyone else.
Can you hear me?
I hear you.
Earth to William Entrigan.
Hello, hello.
Yo.
There we go.
Can I ask you my question?
About Xcode?
About the ingredients. All right, so the title of the episode is starting with Xcode, how to open source your first Swift thing. Mm-hmm. So it's my understanding, I'm going to be working with this stuff real soon with my dev.
Yeah.
For Jump Tech Club. So Xcode is like the proprietary code, right, for iOS devices, right?
Yes.
And it's different than Swift. If you were to use Swift or Flutter, you're going to have to go to Xcode afterwards, right?
No. Swift is the language. So Swift compares with Python or JavaScript. Xcode is the software. You're going to see that in a second. Another popular one is called AppCode.
And what I'm saying seems to confirm it. You must use Xcode in order to publish on iOS. Even if you're using something else for most of the stuff, the submission process, I believe, requires you to go through Xcode.
Not true. Xcode is also a very popular software. There's another popular software called Fastlane, which is automated and it's done from the command line. And I've used this myself. And sometimes you don't want to use Xcode. I'll show you why real fast. I have another software called Imposter. Now, I could have written this using AppCode. I could have wrote this using Xcode. However, I wrote this game in 40 different languages. The screenshots alone for this monstrosity is over 2 gigabytes. Here's Spanish on an iPhone Pro, iPad Pro, 11-inch, 4th generation, scene number 1. Uploading the screenshots to Apple could easily take a week, but if you're doing this by yourself. I mean, just an infinite amount of time. There are tools for this. These same tools can also help you publish.
What I'm looking at from at least ChatGPT telling me, it's saying that other solutions like Expo or even like Mac Cloud, they will use Xcode in the background to produce the same results. That inevitably, it seems, Xcode will be involved in some way publishing to the App Store.
There's also Xcode tools, which you do need to install. You can't even run anything on your command line, much at all, without installing Xcode tools. This is separate from Xcode app, and it's something that lives in terminal. That is true. If you're reading it, if you're reading that as what that means, that's true. Also, GPT is not.
I mean, that would make sense. That would make sense.
All right, let's go through this recipe here. So we're going to go to Xcode, choose File, New Package, File, New Package, Multi-Platform Library. Click Next. Navigate to Desktop folder. Ensure Create GitHub is unchecked. Click Create. Use Xcode 15.2 is the latest version. That's wrong. We're going to use Xcode 15.3. Let's update that. Number 2, add some functionality. So we're going to add some features into this project here. Go to the terminal, go to this folder. I'm going to download this little file into the project called whiteking.swift. So it gave us some source code. The source code, okay. Create a Swift project for your example application. So we're going to have an example. This is, theoretically, this is optional, but we're saying this is best practice, so we're going to say to do that. In Xcode, choose File, New Project, File, Project, iOS app, click Next, project name. Set the project name to example. Example. Set the team to none. Set organization to this thing. Set user interface to Swift UI, language to Swift, storage to none. Ensure include text is not selected. Click Next. You can see we're blowing through this. Create the project. Ensure Git repo is off. Click Add to is don't add. Select the folder on your desktop and don't double click it. Click Create. We're going to be inspired by AlamoFire. This is a very well regarded project that does networking for Swift. So we're going to move example source code to a folder named sources. Open the example Xcode project in Xcode. Show the project navigator on the left, the folder icon. Use the project navigator to select the example. From the project navigator, rename this folder to sources. It also gives you a note, the AlamoFire project does this, they name it source, but we call it sources because that is a default that Swift uses. These are the notes you want. Somebody recognized an inconsistency between what AlamoFire does and what Swift Package Manager does and made a decision and why. These are the decisions that developers have all the time. You're reading 2 different documentations. One of them's older, one of them's newer, especially with Apple stuff, which changes very frequently. And you want to be confident that somebody saw these 2 things. I read this file all the time when I start new projects, this recipe. If I had seen that inconsistency, I'd be like, oh, did they know about this? Yes, they knew about this. So they wrote it down and they told you, and now you can be confident to proceed. Fix the info.plist file config and preview. Xcode makes this a pain. This is a bug with Xcode for the past 10 plus years. They never fixed. So click example on the left, the blue icon. Click the target example in the middle. Click build setting, enter development assets in the search box. In the deployment section, edit the value from example preview to become sources preview. Add some functionality to the example app. Use terminal to inject some files. Okay, so we're going to make this folder called sources. We're going to pull in this file. Make your example app depend on your module. Okay, so we made a module, which is that whiteking.swift file. It's going to be a chess thing. Then we have an example app. And so we want to make sure the example pulls in the reusable module. In Xcode, choose File, Add Package Dependency. Click Add Local. Select the project folder on desktop. Add. Cannot be a direct ancestor of project. So this is not something that I saw before. So see the recipe broke between Xcode 15.2 and 15.3. So now we have I think we're mostly done here. So now we're going to open the example project in Xcode. We're going to use the scheme navigator. We're going to run it. Okay, it takes a minute to run the first time. There it is. So there's a white chess king shown on there. And now what you're seeing here is a combination of the content view from the example file. So there's no king here. So the king is imported from the module. This is the reusable code. So this could be somebody else's project. So when you actually see that, when you see that king here, you're seeing a combination of work between the example app and the reusable picture of a king. Now, if you're going to do waveforms like I showed you before or something else, you're going to have something more interesting than a white king there. Let's wrap it up here. So we failed. So what we tried to do, which worked last month on Xcode, no longer works this month. Actually, this has worked for several years this way, where you can make a module. But we've gone through the recipe, which is good testing, and we've seen this approach no longer works today. Even if we take the code that previously ran, we can run it, but we can't do that again today. So next remaining work here to do is I'm going to take the old code, I'm going to take the new code that we got out of Xcode today, and I'm going to diff them And maybe there's a workaround, working around yet another bug in Xcode that'll probably be there for another 10 years. And then we'll just document that step, and we will save everybody else banging their head against the wall for the thousands of people that might use this as a starting point. So that is the minor contribution of open source, and that's that's how you make progress. You just document these dumb things so that other people can find it when they have the same problem.